Hi, everybody. Dr. Paul here, and welcome to my very first book review. I thought this was an important book to choose for my first book review. The most uh, a rare book, unexpectedly useful book, and the reason I called it rare is because it pertains to a little less than the world's half the world's total population, a little less than half the world's total population, and is also a frontier area, one of the biggest frontier areas for new psychology research and new models of service delivery in psychology. And that happens to be about males, male psychology. We don't understand males. So, another reason I called it rare, it's available, it's on Amazon. You can get it as a textbook. It happens to be the only existing and first comprehensive textbook in the world on male psychology. And I did not develop it. So this is somebody else's work, but I thought it was important enough to be my first review. I'm going to review using some notes for myself the Palgrave Handbook of Male Psychology and Mental Health. So here we go. This is a groundbreaking handbook. It challenges traditional perspectives on male psychology and mental health. It presents evidence based research that goes beyond simplistic narratives about masculinity. It integrates biological, psychological, and social factors to provide a nuanced understanding of male mental health challenges. And it also proposes innovative male friendly therapeutic approaches, meaning males on average on a bell curve, if you look at the mean, the median, they tend to need an entirely different kind of psychotherapy, several of them. And just cutting to the chase, they happen to be very action oriented, goal oriented therapies, helping male clients or patients get to their goals, makes them happy and makes them well functioning. So we begin with some of the key findings and insights in the Palgrave Handbook. Um, some of the authors are Dr. John Barry, Dr. Martin Seeger, Roger Kingersley, Luke Sullivan, and others. Okay, testosterone and behavior. Research with women having PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, revealed that testosterone's psychological effects are complex, involving both direct biological impacts and indirect social responses. Testosterone influences psychology through multiple pathways: direct, indirect, activational, and organizational. And prenatal testosterone exposure organizes brain development, you see. So think about that for a bit. Um, somebody on Substack was talking to me back and forth recently about the epiphenomenon of what a biological substrate leads to in uh, psychological expression. So psychology is not the same as biology in the same in the same way software is not the same as hardware, and yet they need each other. And then software's effects, in part, are guided, structured, influenced by the nature of the hardware. That's what this person was talking about. So prenatal testosterone exposure organizes brain development. That means testosterone levels prenatally can have an actual effect on the I was going to say permanent. It's not permanent, the durable kind of circuitry design of the brain itself, the hardware, in other words, right? This reminds me a little bit of Simon Baron Cohen, cousin of Sacha Baron Cohen, the comedian, who's the expert on autism, whose theory is hypermasculine brain. In other words, a brain that was, pre-developed biologically by the amount of testosterone prenatally. So they talk about that. Brain differences. Neuroimaging studies show consistent sex differences in brain structure and function. Male brains typically have larger amygdalas, which are, as you know, the anxiety alarm bell of the brain, an emotional processing center. Female brains show greater interhemispheric connectivity, right? The corpus callosum. We've talked about that before. They have a slightly thicker, on average, corpus callosum between the left and right brain. That would imply more coordination between left brain organizational, structural, analytic, logic, and creativity, openness to new ideas and syntheses. So female brains show greater inner hemispheric connectivity. The differences influence but don't determine exact behavioral patterns, right? In the same way that hardware influences software use but doesn't dictate exactly how the software works. A big part of this book, the world's first comprehensive textbook about male psychology, Barry Seeger, Kingersley, and others, critique of toxic masculinity, that concept, that sociology concept. I don't know originally where it came from, somebody's blog somewhere. The scientific concerns are the term represents a cognitive distortion through overgeneralization. Those of you who talk about biases, right, unconscious biases and distortions, that's what it is. I uh, I know for a fact the word toxic is just a bland, kind of crude street language, overgeneralized word that really means narcissistic if it does have any scientific credence. And you can't assign a global general potential human trait to any immutable human trait. It's like saying I'm part Ukrainian, part Irish. It's like saying Ukrainians are jerks and the Irish are hostile. That can't possibly be true. It's like a bully's insult. When you pair um, a willful, chosen set of behaviors, consciously chosen set of behaviors with an immutable trait, that's the ultimate bully's insult on a playground. So that's their argument. And I definitely agree. It lacks empirical testing and scientific rigor. Toxic masculinity does. It unfairly characterizes all masculinity based on extreme negative examples. Yes. May be counterproductive to male mental health support. Absolutely. It's actually, I believe, depressogenic. It depletes not only the self esteem, but what Freud called libido, which simply means passion for life, which is the same as masculinity itself. So using pejoratives like this on almost half the world's population, literally depletes the thing that is being discussed, masculinity itself, which I believe to be a synonym for life force. Freud called that libido. Strange word to choose, but that's what he called it. It's your joie de vivre. It's the opposite of ennui or malaise, or dysthymia in a male. The same would be true of femininity. These are just synonyms for your life force, your feeling of truly being alive. The operative word, I think, would be passion. Passion for life is what is actually depleted by the use of this bully's playground insult called toxic anything. There's nothing specific that's ever toxic. Someone is narcissistic to whatever degree, or they're not, or they're less so. Masculine traits like protectiveness and providing are fundamentally altruistic, not toxic. These behaviors evolved to benefit families and communities. They evolved, evolution, over hundreds of thousands of years, not last week. Healthy masculinity provides significant benefits to individuals and society. Now, when you get into the things I talk about, my materials and courses and so forth, you know that I divide the brain into not the brain, but the mind into these three parts, the triune brain model, reptilian, mammalian, and higher brain, it makes it easy to then understand that we don't have to use the vague terminology, healthy masculinity. We can say masculinity is exclusively instinctual and passion based. Freud would call it the id. It's the underworld, it's the unconscious mind. That can be, it's very powerful. Passion, right, is far more powerful than I'm glad or I'm satisfied. Those are more emotional, mammalian kinds of experiences as a human. But passion is super powerful. But it's like Frankenstein's monster. It could be evil, yet innocent and not knowing where it's going and what it's doing. And it's doing harm if it is not guided by the higher brain, the conscious mind, what Freud called the superego. So I think this tri- tripartite structure of the mind, whatever you want to call it, triune brain model, Freud's the superego, ego, and id, whatever you want to call it, it's always three parts. It's the unconscious, instinctual aspect of the mind and our behavior, then the emotions, the subconscious, almost conscious, but guides like guideposts or traffic lights, the emotions are. And then there's the conscious mind, the higher brain. That's where we decide and have the free will to do what is good and ethical versus what is harmful and selfish or narcissistic. Okay. All right. The importance of fatherhood is next. We're going through kind of summary of what does the book offer you. And I want to do this at least in a general fashion because in the years since this book has been published, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I have not met a single colleague online or in person that even knows it exists or when I tell them a bit about it, has any interest whatsoever in reading it or using it. And yet, if you are a therapist or have a therapist, if you are male or love males in your life and want the best possible treatment, you need this book. You need to read this book. Your therapist needs to read this book, especially if you're male or if you care about males, because this material doesn't exist anywhere in training programs. It doesn't. That's why I think it's crucial to understand it. In addition to that, that nobody I've ever met online or in person has ever heard of this book or is willing to even read it. Beyond that is the fact that what is the most important um, thing to address in all of mental health or behavioral health worldwide? What is it? If you could only pick one thing in healthcare or medicine, medical practice or therapy practice or behavioral health, you could only pick one thing, what would it have to be that trumps all other things, that supersedes all other things? Stop death. It would be stop death. There's nothing more important than that. If you claim to be in healthcare, behavioral health, medicine, or therapy as a practitioner, you must stop death, superseding all else. Okay. So in mental health, that would be homicidal tendencies or harm toward others, which does occur, but then law enforcement helps that a lot. What else is left that law enforcement does not stop or screen for, scan for, or intervene on? Usually suicide. What is the percentage, nearly worldwide percent, but certainly in the US and the UK, the percent by way of biological sex of completed suicide? 80% male, 4 out of 5. Doesn't mean we would wish for there to be an equal amount of women. That would be silly. But what it does tell us is we don't understand males who are depressed. We don't understand them. This book does. It absolutely offers solutions that would prevent those 45 to 50,000 people, 80% of which are male, yearly in the United States from dying. That's the size of a major football stadium, the capacity, 45 to 50,000 dead people could be prevented by some of the knowledge in this book. Next, the importance of fatherhood, impact on children. Father absence is linked to increased ADHD, behavioral problems, and mental health issues in children. This is all research based, all cited. Fathers provide unique parenting contributions that complement maternal care. Father involvement benefits both sons and daughters through development. There are unique paternal contributions. Paternal not as a pejorative or slang, but just meaning fatherly, biologically based fatherly activity on a bell curve, most common to males. They're more likely to engage in physical play and encourage calculated risk taking. And is there ever risk in life? Yes. Thus we think of helicopter parenting and things like this, making children weak and unprepared for risk, where they have to go with their gut, make a decision. They model different problem solving approaches. They provide distinct emotional regulation support. They influence daughters' reproductive decision making and emotional health eventually. How scary it is to meet the father, if you're a male, of a woman you're starting to date. It's kind of scary because of their fatherliness, their protectiveness. The male mental health crisis. There are concerning statistics. Men have significantly higher suicide rates, which I mentioned, across all age groups. Men are less likely to seek professional mental health help. What do you think of that one? That's like legendary, right? And those who have commented on it, who are on the international or national stage, still to this day tend to say it's because they're dumb. Males are dumb or bad, or they're just so stubborn. Why won't they go to mental health treatment, meaning psychotherapy? They don't show. They abandon the treatment. They get dragged kicking and screaming to personal individual therapy sometimes, and certainly to couples counseling. They won't do it. They don't get it. What's the real reason? Is it because they're dumb, stupid, stubborn, idiotic, or childish, or narcissistic? No, it's because it doesn't work. That's what this book teaches you. It teaches you what to do right for males that absolutely will work in a statistics-based, researched way. That's why males won't go. Another reason they won't go is revealed also in this book and in Martin Seeger and Dr. John Barry's research, especially Martin Seeger, about the first three male instincts that have been uncovered. One of which was surprising to me. The third one was stoicism, a natural stoicism in males, meaning, I want to let it pass by. I got other things to do. I'm not fazed by the problem you want me to go to therapy for. And in fact, I'd rather solve it myself. And I most certainly don't want to display weakness or my emotions publicly. So, how might this apply to males not going to psychotherapy in its current ineffective for them form? It would manifest itself through their refusal to go, because in part, some of the current forms, especially group therapy and mixed company, is them revealing their emotions and weaknesses publicly, technically, even if it was to a stranger therapist they just met, who is a stranger, and they're going to reveal their weaknesses. They may do that consciously and purposely to try to do what they can to make use of the psychotherapy, but instinctually, meaning unconsciously, built into all males ever born, on average, on a bell curve, and 65+% of them are close to the mean, then they have an instinctual drive, a passionate force that would prevent them from voluntarily revealing weakness or emotion. Why? If you want to be simplistic about it with a little storytelling that you always hear from evolution and evolutionary psychologists, if you had a bunch of males out on aboriginals out on a hunting party to, kill for meat for the village or kill the woolly mammoth or to defensively fight back against a warring tribe, would it be helpful for a male to start revealing his weaknesses to the other hunters or warriors or to cry? How would that help the morale and the success of the hunting team? If you think of, football teams trying to win the Super Bowl or soccer teams trying to win a world championship or rugby, is it going to help the team's morale for somebody to be crying and say, I'm weak. I need to quit right in the middle of the game? No. So that's simplistically, that's likely how this instinct evolved, the stoicism instinct, which is why males won't go to therapy because they have to reveal their weaknesses, especially couples counseling. All right. Feminized therapeutic approaches may not effectively reach men. That's what I just described. Help seeking barriers. Traditional masculine norms emphasize strength and self reliance instinctually, too. It's biology, not learned, not passed down through generations. That's ridiculous. Stigma around, you'd have to be an Oscar winning actor for your entire life, always performing 24/7. How is that possible? If it's roles, like an actor's role, be exhausting. Probably why half the Saturday Night Live actors quit, from the rigor of their the work they do weekly on SNL. Probably exhausting. Therapeutic models don't align with male psychological characteristics, which I described. Male friendly therapeutic approaches. We need to adapt therapies to suit male psychology characteristics rather than trying to change men to fit, some blogger's ideal of what men should be. They are what they are, and biology will demand you understand it. It will not comply with your wish list. Focus on action oriented interventions, action oriented with concrete steps, step by step. Hierarchies, hierarchies of males. This is worth a quick little mention. And notice I'm editorializing as I describe this. I'm just not just reading a summary. So, why do males need hierarchy? And when you hear about anti hierarchical forces, like people think, let's have everything be flat. Let's have a flat hierarchy. Everyone's equal. It's not about a narcissistic drive in males or in anyone to dominate others and one up others narcissistically. From an instinctual perspective and an evolutionary psychology perspective, why would males have to have hierarchy? In other words, rank, names for ranks. In the army, private, corporal, sergeant, captain, colonel, uh, major, colonel, general. Why did they need that? Because they tend to be lost in terms of action. What do I do? If I'm equal to a general, am I supposed to jump in and lead the army? Or should I try to fly a fighter jet when I've never been trained at it? It's that the hierarchical rank helps eliminate anxiety in the male, generate confidence and a drive to use the competence that matches the name of the rank the male has achieved. Whatever it's in, it could be in academia. Are you a professor, assistant professor, senior instructor, or student, graduate? Are you a graduate student, a PhD student, an MD, a bachelor's degree? What is your rank? It means it has been proven your competence to match the tasks that can be implemented by that rank. Males were lost without that. That's why they need it. So this is talking about society and how society is letting males down by flattening hierarchies. Acceptance and commitment therapy, specific interventions. ACT works. Accept and commit. It's value based action. CAT, cognitive analytic therapy, works for male clients as well. It's action oriented. Group activities involving indirect emotional sharing. That means like coaching, especially they cite that the number one most effective type of psychotherapy for males, besides them probably universally needing trauma work like EMDR, with the most conventional therapy that would work number one for males is men's groups of males who don't directly share their emotions but share their competencies toward reaching goals mutually based on expertise, in which there is no one-upping. It's teamwork, like a sports team wants to work together. And there might be a captain of the sports team, but they all do their job, helping each other, supporting each other without necessarily crying and going into public expression of emotion. Educational challenges, the boy problem. The Boy Crisis is a pretty famous book by Warren Farrell and John Gray. Academic underachievement. Boys are falling behind in reading and writing. Higher rates of ADD diagnosis. School suspensions. Lower rates of higher education pursuit, as you know. It's down to a third of attendees and graduates of bachelor's degrees and higher. You may even notice if you've been alive more than 30 or 40 years, you may notice when you were a child or a teen, every single doctor you saw was male. Today, you might be hard pressed to have a male doctor. The rise of women, which is great in education, but for some reason, males dropped out of pursuing these things, education. Societal and cultural factors, societal norms and cultural expectations shape male experience. Traditional provider protector roles for males create both drive, reward, and importantly, meaning. Like, what is life all about? Does it have meaning for me? You know, I just rewatched for the third time the Anthony Bourdain biography on video of his friends, close friends and family, his brother and others' reaction to his suicide. And a lot of them, especially toward the end, talked of meaning. Like, what meaning does life have? It reminds you of Viktor Frankl surviving the Nazi concentration camps and man's search for meaning. That meaning can keep you alive, but the absence of it and the hopelessness to ever find meaning leaves nothing to live for, perhaps. So I think of Anthony Bourdain a lot, when I learn about these new techniques for males. Implications for practice for mental health professionals. We need to develop male friendly therapeutic approaches. We need to address masculine shame and failure experiences directly. Now, what is that? This is so crucial to talk about. This is kind of the gold nugget of all of this. What is shame? Many people say, oh, it's similar to guilt. Only guilt is useful. It corrects our behaviors. Not useful. It just harms us. It harms our sense of personhood, sense of self. And it's an obstacle to finding meaning. So what is shame? For a male or a female, I believe it to be literally a depletion of some amount of your, what we have called masculinity, if you're a male, and biologically, and femininity, if you're a female biologically. So, and therefore, and I'm asserting this, but you can conclude from this textbook that this is true if you read between the lines, that masculinity is absolutely the same thing as Freud's word libido which didn't mean sexual appetite. That's twisted. It meant life force, kind of like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. It's the force, but it's the force of life for a biological male. We could call it masculinity, and it is an energy. And you could call it reptilian brained and instinct driven and instinct expressed. So there is no shame for a male unless it has harmed that energy, robbed it, taken it away, denied its expression, or literally depleted it by an attack on the personhood, not just your ideas, your emotions, made you feel a little sad, was a little bit insulting, but somehow harmed your very sense of personhood and where you where you derive meaning in life has been depleted a certain amount. The exact amount of shame that the male feels is the exact amount of masculinity depleted, blocked, or robbed by some traumatic event. Same is true, I believe, of females. We call it femininity. On the bell curve average of the biologic female is femininity as the life force, as the synonym is passion. If you think about passion in a Darwinian sense, if the whole concept of evolution, most simplistically, is about a creature needs to survive long enough to reproduce. And whatever traits, behaviors, tendencies, circuitry in that creature had evolved so far was adaptive to its current consistent environment or inconsistent or its chaotic environment that enabled it to survive and also to reproduce, to go through some sort of courtship ritual successfully. And that's a whole giant frontier. That's my second most um, passion driven academic pursuit is human courtship because it's neglected. There is no such thing as a system of it. There are matchmakers, right, going with their gut, or some of them are charlatans, some of them are very intuitive, but they're not using a codified science. So I think male psychology and human courtship are the two frontiers of psychology. But back to what is shame for a male or a female, it is a depletion of the life force to a certain amount. The amount of the shame is the amount of the depletion of the life force. If somebody was so shamed that it depleted their entire sense of self, their entire being, and meaning, and their purpose or their mission for their life, and that was all gone, all lost, then it's as if the person has been reduced to a ghost. They might even describe themselves that way. The suicidal person might say they're the walking dead. They're a ghost. They're empty. It's shame based. So what I was saying earlier is I truly believe all major traumas aren't really traumas unless they are wrapped with shame. All traumas, they wouldn't be traumas if they didn't produce some significant amount of shame. And if we define shame as a depletion of some masculinity in the biologic male or depletion of some femininity in a biologic female, aka passion for life, then it wasn't even a trauma. So when I think of trauma now, and EMDR, those who practice EMDR or who have received it, everything that bubbles up that's highly emotional for you and gets healed through EMDR is also a former shame experience that robbed you of some meaning in life, robbed you of some identity, passionate energy. If you're biologic male, you call it masculinity. If you're biologic female, you call it femininity. No matter what your orientation is, by the way, one or the other. Or just use the neutral word passion for life. That's what we got robbed. And that's what can come back to you if you do trauma work, if you do EMDR. You're pulling it back from your good memories of your life, your sense of meaning. You reintegrate into a new person, third version of yourself. There was pre-trauma, during trauma, and now post-trauma. You recover your passion for life again at best. Therefore, your masculinity and your femininity, the opposite of shame. Shame is a vacuum or an absence of masculinity or femininity, in my view. Future directions. So we've been here a little while now. Further investigation of male-friendly therapeutic interventions is called for. Longitudinal studies of masculine development over the lifespan. Cross-cultural studies of male psychology and mental health, and biological mechanisms underlying male-female differences. I really like the cross-cultural mention here. One of the most important models in psychology and behavioral health is called the biopsychosocial model. Biology stands for the brain circuitry, the brain itself, the circuitry. Psychology is like software. It's the mind. But then there is a barrier called a personal boundary that wraps all that together, the mind and the brain, software and hardware, against the outside world. And that third term is sociology. Sociology is the wild and woolly world of journalism, culture, politics, religion, everything that's out there. The water you swim in as a fish. That's sociology. And it is not you. It doesn't define who you are. It is what you're in, what you navigate, what you interact with, what you do trade with, where you feel most comfortable and fit in the best. But it is not the same as you. So, what's important about cross-cultural studies? If Seeger and Berry comment that these biologic instincts in males that they are starting to uncover that the Greeks knew about. When every god in the Greek pantheon is like a superhero with one superpower who uses that superpower, and all it is a representation of all the various instincts that are biologically passed on in males, genetically, biologically through evolution. Same is true of females. So that's why I talk about the Greek myths all the time, because they're both entertaining and storytelling, but also because each one of them is a superhero with a superpower that is one of the male instincts or one of the female instincts. So why cross-cultural studies? Seeger and Berry say, look, sociology has dominated psychological research, or let's say humanities research, since the beginning, since Freud. And psychology never really had the experimental design and rigor to, run a horse race with sociologists and catch up and pass them in research. Sociology is not psychology. They are different. They have different disciplines, different rules, different concerns. So now finally, psychology research is catching up and it has sophisticated experimental design. And the point of cross-cultural studies then is if Seeger and Berry have found these masculine instincts to be the same in their expression, prevalence, use, structure, and place in every culture of the world, even distant, separated cultures that couldn't possibly have ever communicated, and they still exist in the same form, then it's saying that sociology is not a factor and is not a part of this whole conversation at all. It means psychologically and biologically, male instincts are real and exist, and they aren't passed on through storytelling or generationally. They're genetic, biological. Same is true of femininity, by the way. So that's the meaning of that. And then they also say it's likely that throughout human history, these masculine instincts have been expressed the same way on average throughout all history and every culture of the world, which means sociology isn't even a part of this discussion. Psychology and biology are. So, in conclusion, the Palgrave Handbook of Male Psychology represents a paradigm shift in understanding male psychology and mental health. Rather than viewing masculinity as inherently problematic, it presents evidence for positive aspects while acknowledging genuine mental health challenges. We need evidence based, compassionate approaches that work rather than against male psychological characteristics. In other words, instead of harming and blocking these masculine instincts, which causes shame, the exact opposite of what one ought to do as a therapist. You want to help the client or the patient, not shame them, even if it's unwitting on your part. This book will prevent you from unwittingly harming the sense of self and meaning of an individual. The integration of biological, psychological, and social factors provides comprehensive framework. There is nothing else except those three in people's problems. And it offers solutions, this book does, for mental health professionals, educators, and society to better support boys and men. All right, guys. I think next time I could do, maybe even with Jeremy, I could do a podcast on this more bullet point, getting down to practicalities. How would you locate this, find this, implement it? You can buy the textbook, even if you're not a practitioner, you're a patient. You could buy this textbook. It'll really enlighten you. There's also Richard Reeves' book, I think, on boys and men. And then there's finally Farrell and Gray wrote the book, The Boy Crisis. That's even a few more years old. But I believe this to be the world's most important current textbook for psychology practice or therapy practice. Why? Because it addresses how significantly we don't provide the correct kinds of psychotherapy to half the world's population. We don't understand that they have instincts that are genetic, biologically programmed throughout human history in all world cultures. And this book offers the correct kinds of psychotherapies and principles to understand where you will definitely help heal an individual who is male. We had a lot of people join here. Yeah, there's also another book. Ali says it's called Perspectives in Male Psychology, an introduction. That is more of a summary, a cheaper book, more affordable. This is, after all, a textbook we're talking about. So when I bought it, it was something like $170. Well worth it. I read it cover to cover, and I read the research articles, like hundreds of them at the bottom of every article. And it's a compendium of many psychologists and therapists coming together, most of them in the UK, and most of them associated with the British Psychological Society and or University College London, where John Barry works. And he's a close colleague of Dr. Martin Seeger. And I'm told I once had the honor of being edited by Dr. Seeger, and I didn't realize that. So I was like, wow, amazing. Because I write for John Barry for his publication. He has a great magazine, like a blog, sort of like Psychology Today. All right, guys, thank you for joining. And I'll join you again, possibly with Jeremy sometime soon. Thanks.